We're watching more movies than ever, and somehow it feels like we're finding fewer that actually stay with us. Every week there's something new. New releases, new shows, new recommendations pushed into our screens. The volume has never been higher, and yet, if you stop and think about it, how many of these stories really linger? How many feel like they were made with intention, instead of just delivered on schedule? At the same time, something quieter is happening behind the scenes. Thousands of people who've dedicated their lives to storytelling, writers, editors, crews are being laid off across the industry. According to Deadline's ongoing layoff tracker, major media and entertainment companies have continued cutting jobs deep into 2026, even as production pipelines remain active and content output stays high. So that raises a strange condition. If more content is being made, why are fewer people needed to make it? And more importantly, what does that mean for the stories themselves? Because this isn't just an industry story. It's not just about jobs, it's about the experiences we all share, sitting down, pressing play, and hoping to feel something real. To understand that, we have to look at what the system is actually optimizing for. Take Netflix as an example. In 2026, they're doubling down on original films across a wide range of genres, continuing a strategy focused less on traditional franchises and more on volume and variety. According to the Los Angeles Times, the average Netflix subscriber watches about 7 movies per month. The goal isn't just to make a great film, the goal is to keep the system moving, to constantly feed a platform that depends on engagement, retention, and time spent watching. So naturally, the question shifts. If the system needs more content, then how do you make more content faster? And that's where the next layer comes in. Because at the same time this expansion is happening, companies are also investing heavily in tools that make production more efficient. Netflix recently acquired an AI film technology company connected to Ben Affleck, aimed to improving and streamlining parts of the filmmaking process, things like fixing lighting issues, enhancing scenes, and reducing the need for reshoots. Reporting from Routers also highlights how AI tools are being used more broadly across the film industry to optimize workflows and reduce production friction. And on the surface, that sounds like progress. Faster production, lower costs, fewer delays. But if you follow that logic one step further, another question appears. If AI can fix mistakes, if it can fill in gaps, if it can reduce the need for certain steps in the process, how many people does it quietly replace? And suddenly the earlier contradiction starts to make sense. More content, fewer people, faster timelines. This isn't a collapse, it's optimization. And optimization always removes friction. But here's the uncomfortable part. In a creative process, friction isn't always a bad thing. Friction is where ideas get changed, where mistakes turn into breakthroughs, and where someone pushes back and says, "This doesn't feel right." If you start removing that friction, what happens to the outcome? What happens to the stories? Because from the outside, you don't experience work efficiency. You experience the final product. You experience whether something feels alive or whether it just fills time. And this is where the pattern becomes clear. The system isn't really asking, is this a great story? It's asking, will someone click on it? Will they finish it? Will they watch another one after? And those are very different questions. Because when those become the priorities, something subtle starts to happen. Stories become safer, more familiar, more repeatable. Not because creators don't have better ideas, but because the system rewards what works predictably. So if you're someone trying to make films, you feel this as limitation. You feel it as pressure to fit into something already proven. And if you're someone who loves watching movies, you feel it differently. You feel it as repetition. You scroll longer, you watch more, but it becomes harder to find something that actually surprises you. Something that feels like it took a risk. And that leads to a deeper question. Who is the system actually built for? Because if it prioritizes scale, if it prioritizes efficiency, if it prioritizes continuous output, then it's not really built around the individual creator, and it's not entirely built around the audience either. It's built around the platforms itself, around keeping the machine running, around making sure there's always something next. And here's where things start to shift, because the same forces driving this change inside of Hollywood are also creating something unexpected outside of it. The tools that make production faster and cheaper are becoming more accessible. The distribution channels that used to be closed are now open. And for the first time in a long time, those two things are happening at the same time, which means the question is no longer just, how do you get into the system? It becomes, what can you build without it? And that's not just a question for filmmakers. It's a question for everyone watching. For decades, Hollywood didn't just produce entertainment. It decided what kinds of stories were worth telling, what voices got amplified, what audiences had access to. It shaped the menu, and most of us just chose from it. But now, that control is starting to loosen. Not all at once, not dramatically, but enough that you can start to see the edges of something new. Independent creators are making films, documentaries, and series outside of traditional systems. Platforms like YouTube are no longer just hosting content. They're becoming places where entire creative ecosystems exist. And at the same time, audiences are slowly realizing they don't have to stay inside one pipeline. They can look elsewhere. They can support different voices. They can choose stories that feel more personal, more experimental, more real. So what's happening isn't just disruption, it's redistribution of tools, of access, of power. And like any shift like this, most people don't notice at first. Because on the surface, everything still looks the same. Big releases, big platforms, big budgets, but underneath, the foundation is changing. The old model was built on gatekeeping. You need approval, you need funding, you need access to even begin. And now, those barriers are starting to weaken. Not disappear completely, but weaken enough that a different path becomes possible. And that's where this moment becomes important, because most people on both sides are still operating like nothing has changed. Filmmakers are still waiting to be chosen, waiting to be funded, and waiting for permission. And audiences are still defaulting to what's promoted, what's familiar, and what's easy to access. But the system itself is no longer centered around people. It's centered around efficiency. It's not really going to choose you. Not as a creator, and not as someone looking for something meaningful to watch. So the responsibility starts to shift. If you want to create something that matters, you might have to build it outside the system. And if you want to experience stories that actually stay with you, you might have to look beyond it. Because the future of storytelling isn't just decided by the people who make things, it's shaped by the people who've chosen to engage with it. And right now, most people don't realize they have that choice. They're still waiting, still scrolling, still assuming the best work will rise to the top of the same system. But systems don't prioritize meaning. They prioritize what keeps them running. Which means the people who move first, who experiment, who explore, who step outside of that loop on both sides, are the ones who will shape what storytelling becomes next. And this window doesn't stay open forever, which is why this moment matters more than it seems. Not because Hollywood is ending, but because for the first time in a long time, it's no longer the only place where storytelling can begin.
Hey, if you enjoyed this video, I am going to humbly ask that you do two things for me. The first is I want you to leave a comment. I want you to tell me your thoughts around everything you've heard in this video. I want to hear your opinion. I genuinely do. Do you agree with it? Do you think it's a consistent, correct analysis? And if not, I want to hear that as well. The other thing is I want to ask you if you would, and you enjoyed the video, I'm going to humbly ask that you share it. I know how the YouTube algorithm works, and the most amount of people that leave a comment, sharing their thoughts, engaging with the content, as well as sharing it with other people, that word of mouth kind of method, that is the most effective. And if you want to see another video that I did where I asked ChatGPT to predict what filmmaking is going to look like in the next 40 years, just click this video right over there.
Filmmakers have to design the worlds that they're going to use as their backdrop. AI is going to be able to help design that. So essentially in-studio productions, all in a digital world, is going to become the norm, even though we're still using cameras to point and shoot at that world, right?